Jim Hogue, and the program is House at Pooh Corner. And today we have a Vermont visionary with us today, running for governor, Emily Peyton from Putney, and her collaborator in this effort, campaign collaborator, who's John Root from Petersham, Massachusetts. And they are touring the state so that Emily's message can get out. And we decided to do this program because there aren't very many Vermont visionaries out there running. And I wanted to hear a vision for Vermont's future that was productive and on a human scale and all these wonderful things that are outside the paradigm. And Emily, for many, many years, has been definitely outside the paradigm, and many of her ideas are a positive vision for the state of Vermont. So I will turn the program over to Emily and John, and we'll see what happens.
But you know what's very funny is, even though I've been outside the paradigm, and incidentally, you've been there with me, and lately I've been getting feedback that the blessed unrest, as we call it, the general unrest with the systems that we're working under, is becoming so great that the desire for an alternative paradigm is moving much closer. So the work that we've done in the past to introduce public banking, of course, resulted in a tiny step. Also, there was a lot of work at the State House to get some money into VITA. We have more work to do to reform our monetary system so we have an easier to those who need it the most. And the hemp, of course. We've made big strides with that. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more work to do, of course, particularly in the judicial system. And I think there's a desire amongst the people now, an earnest desire, to move our entire penal system towards a restorative methodology. And of course, to stop sending people to Kentucky and stop the criminalization of nonviolent offenses, for starters.
Yeah, well, there are lots of issues. There are really a host of issues that the two major parties, or the Tweedledee and Tweedledum parties, never really change. They never really talk about how we could create a genuinely nurturing economy. Mm-hmm. And the ways in which one can do that have both to do with money. The fact that the money is scarce, it's always hard to come by, that's a major problem. And there are many things that we can do about that. And the other thing is the attitude that the government, the state, could take towards local initiatives. Mm-hmm. If the government were focused on local initiatives, on people getting together in the neighborhoods where they live, right, and talking about the things that they would like to see happen, with the possibility of funding it, major changes would come about.
Well, exactly, a lot like what's happening in Bethel with the revitalization projects, for example, their pop-up university. That gives us an idea of how we can augment our educative system and perhaps put in a standard of accreditation for people who are getting their education in alternative ways. John has been a mentor for me, as you have, around monetary systems. And as we see cannabis becoming legal, and we're beginning to grapple with that, what we can do, because we still have problems with the commercial banking empire not wanting to go there, we can envision a canna currency, if you will. But what I hear and what I see that we need is a statewide system of making a standard so that small growers can bring their excess in, have it tested and standardized, and possibly bought by a collective for resale.
Mm-hmm. Like they do in Canada with the hemp.
Yeah.
Tell me, you can instruct me about how they do in Canada.
Oh, well, they just have 3 grades. of hemp for different purposes. I remember I did that because you
Yes, because we've been learning
were
about it, but
talking about it.
it's fun to learn it.
All I know is that the different grades have to do with the strength. You know, one grade is looking for strength, and another grade is looking for something else, and another grade might be medicinal. I don't really remember what the 3 grades are about, but they are a very strict standard.
Yeah.
And I remember I called somebody who was involved in that process at the time.
Canada, actually in Vermont, we have probably the most liberal hemp laws in this hemisphere, in that Vermont wants to treat it like corn and wheat, and they also want to get off the hook for any federal, oppression of the crop. And we're still waiting for the Farm Bill to be passed that has a measure in there that would totally differentiate the hemp from the marijuana, which would be good. But in Canada, most of the hemp that's grown right now is for seed, for the food grade, and we're beginning to see, only beginning to see some of the fiber, and people are wanting to put to use what we're using in building materials. You know that
The hempcrete.
yeah, myself and my partner have a small business in building material. So, and also in Vermont, we're seeing that a lot of people want to know what to do with their stocks, and they're coming to us. And so what we can do, because the processing is extremely expensive to get at this secondary material or even the fiber or to utilize the plant like we could, is when we begin to tax and regulate the marijuana, that some of that revenue go to either a state-owned or cooperative processing plant on the west side of the state, which will be there ready for when New York, which has the acreage that we need to serve a plant, will be there to serve that, and it will provide the raw materials for numbers of jobs, numbers of hard plastics. I hope the listeners have educated and informed themselves about the bounty of renewable items and clean and green items that the agricultural hemp, sometimes the canaf, can offer us.
You know, one of the interesting things about hemp that's important to know is that it's nitrogen fixing. So it helps the soil. It sequesters carbon. It doesn't require pesticides or herbicides because it grows pretty densely. It grows quickly. The number of uses that we could use hemp for is just amazing. If you, I remember the list went on for pages. So Vermont used to have a really big paper industry. And
Right.
hemp paper is really, really good. You can make all kinds of different paper out of hemp fibers.
And without spending too much time on hemp, which we can, but there are some myths out there about the hemp. It does need a lot of fertilizer. It's somewhat like corn, so there are some myths out there, and it can have some diseases. And of course, you may be growing it for the CBDs, which is where the Vermont is going, because we have better soil. So when you're extracting CBDs and then you're reducing
What are
it,
CBDs?
the cannabidiols.
The oil.
Yeah, because the THC, remember, is tetrahydrocannabidiol.
Oh,
And
yeah.
cannabidiol is the CBDs. And what the CBDs are, and there's a range of CBDA, there's all these different sort of terpenes, there's these different sub parts of the chemical makeup of a plant that can be changed. And the THC, of course, is the stuff that gets you high, and it also helps with pain. And then there's the CBD, which is present also in a high THC environment, but it's present in the hemp. That is really the workhorse of the healing that reduces not only anxiety but inflammation. It can reduce cancerous growth. It helps the nerve endings communicate. So the endocannabinoid system is the system of the nerves communicating, and we all have natural cannabinoids, but these are phytosynthesized. They're synthesized by plants. So, like, you know, I've made a drink out of fresh hemp leaves. Actually, juicing your own hemp or marijuana leaves, which won't get you high, is excellent. You know, like we do wheatgrass. It's just excellent for your health and for your nervous system to reduce any Alzheimer's or stuff. So it's the hemp industry and the cannabis industry can enormously support not only our health, the housing, can help us meet our carbon sequestering goals, because it actually locks up carbon. It actually is a healthier environment, because the toxins in the wall systems, the formaldehyde, the VOCs, that's what's contributing to the asthmas. So our housing stock is really in poor shape, because most houses only stand for 75, 100 years. Of course, hempcrete is going to stand for hundreds of years. So as we need to repair our housing stock, and we look to hempcrete to do so, we'll be also repairing our children's breathing health too. So it's a vision that's enormously hopeful, enormously productive, and exciting, that I share when I talk about moving forward and with full support for the hemp and cannabis industry.
What if you were governor, or when you're governor, what can the government of Vermont do to promote the hemp industry?
Well, it can do numbers of things. We've talked about a state bank and how important it is to protect Vermont's money in a state bank, because right now it's unprotected in TD Bank North. It's an unsecured creditor over there, and I cannot get Beth Pierce to see how risky it is, because we're due for another crash, and it's in TD Bank North, which for two reasons are super problematic for Vermont. Number one, TD Bank North is the major investor in the tar sands, which is the most environmentally destructive process to remove bismuth or oil, and it's really destroying indigenous lands up there. And TD Bank is the major investor, and we are keeping all our state money. It's something like, what is it? We were running to have, 300-some million up there.
Oh, I don't remember. I certainly knew at one point.
Right, and
It's the pass-through money. It's
exactly. It's like that's the cheapest place that she can find for us to do our checking, as it were. And so for that point, it shouldn't be there. And also because of in the last banking failure, when they were doing the experiments on Greece of bailing in. Remember, they went into people's bank accounts who had a certain that
recapitalize the banks.
Yeah, we are totally unsecured in TD Bank right now. So
the
it's
derivative exposure is what Gary Murphy and I were collaborating on when he died from the fall.
So she made the argument that we would lose our AAA rating, and that was a false argument. Also, that was given to her by the banking lobbyists. So as governor, what I certainly would do is do a lot more public education, so people feel comfortable about having a banking license, probably at VITA, so that we can make our money work more for us. We can make the loans through the banks. We'd be backing the local loans to do this. Certainly advocating for the Canada currency. So we also, so I would be able to expressly inject more means of exchanges, and certainly do a lot of education and a lot of promotion, because what I stand for, and I think a lot of people agree with me, is that we aren't a great country if we leave our people homeless. There's absolutely no reason why we can't have tiny house communities or buying some of the old houses there's no reason to have people without a safe place to put their heads, even if we just stop sending people to Kentucky, which is also another abuse of government.
You mean prisoners?
Yeah, I don't like to call them prisoners. I call them people.
Oh, they're just people. Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that just for rounding out the concept of why we need a large bank to put Vermont money in, is that the balance sheet has to equal out. You can't have too many deposits. That's what happened with Cyprus. They had too many deposits and couldn't support the interest payments on the deposits because they didn't have enough loans. So Vermont has to have a bank that can make that balance work. If there are too many Vermont deposits in Northfield Savings Bank, then the Northfield Savings Bank can't make the interest payments on those deposits.
Which of course are very
So
low.
you do have to have a large bank that has a lot of loans out there and collecting the interest on those loans,
Right.
so that so the income from the account is worth something.
Right.
So I think Beth Pierce is trying to put money in local Vermont banks, but she can only do so much because of that balance of loans versus.
And also her, well, I don't want to speak to Beth Pierce's because I want to move on to some of the things we were just talking with Jeff Fannell about the Fannin, sorry, and who is working with the National Education Association, and what they're proposing for Vermont, which I get behind, is to eliminate property tax altogether and tag it into the income tax, which as a matter of course, without getting too much into the weeds, we can talk in smaller things because people's eyes glaze over, how we can increase circulation of methods of exchange to move towards a reduction of taxation, because regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, the Democrats, of course, will tax higher and the Republicans will get further into debt. The economic oppression of taxation and debt-based monetary system are something we need to grapple with at this time. And we need to do so not in a revolutionary, quick way. We need to do it deliberately with understanding, so that people don't feel like they're being, shifted around or whatever.
California seems to have taken the lead in that.
Yeah.
By the way, Los Angeles in particular is working on public money.
There's one.
We're getting close.
Yeah, there's one town that's experimenting with the universal basic income. Of course, they're only doing a very sample portion, and I think they're only doing $500. But there's places around the globe that now are understanding that participation in the economy with dignity is an element of equality, and it will support our move towards sustainability enormously. And towards, of course, happiness as a measure of success of society.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're having fun on this
whole,
this cycle.
The whole issue of scarce money is one of the things that a governor can do a lot about. The legislature would have to approve of a state bank, but if the governor is behind it and advocating for it and dealing with all of the objections that the banking lobby brings up, then it's quite possible to say very directly, there is no reason for our money to be issued by for-profit banks for profit. And if the state of Vermont were issuing the money, even if it's still as loans, but we're more or less aiming to recoup the cost of administering the whole thing, you could have 0.25% interest rates. You could have, you might have really high interest rates for things that are much more profitable. And that would enable us to just reduce the tax burden and reduce the tax burden. So if you go back to colonial times, there were no taxes except on whiskey.
Yep.
No taxes.
Yeah.
It was all funded by the loans that the legislature made to the businesses. So during colonial times, the business would both get a charter so that they had limited liability, and they would get the money that they needed to establish the mill or
Right.
what have you.
What I have, one asset I have as governor is I have colleagues who are immensely knowledgeable, and Ellen Brown as well, who is leading the public banking movement. But I also want to bring in some other elements, because although we do know that the core issue of the oppression of our times is that all money is coming from the commercial banking empire, those aren't the only issues that I want to talk about today.
Go for it.
I want
Yeah, and you and I could
Yeah,
Right.
we can
talk about
the
monetary
money.
policy.
Yeah, and I'll say what he said, what he said. So I also want to talk about the need for a truth and reconciliation and restitution movement for First Nation peoples, people of color, and also women, and also people who have experienced crimes against them done by a violent government. So one of the things that I'm most eager to do in a position of governor is to initiate a series of, they would be in hotel meeting rooms where we come together, somewhat like what happened in South Africa, where Truth and Reconciliation movement. We need that here. We need that for our healing, and we need that to move forward from the harms that have been done historically, and as we see the harms that are coming to the surface that have been done against women, so that we can move forward with a respect for one another, and an understanding that each one of us are directly connected to what I call source intelligence. Many other people will call it God and so forth, but that I use the term source intelligence. So if you're hearing me talk about that, I'm talking about what other people term as God, or the invisible ethers where the possibilities occur from.
Right, so as governor, you could initiate political therapy sessions.
Essentially, yeah. I've run 3 times and you've run before, so you know how frustrating it is to have a beneficial vision for Vermont and be completely barred from competing fairly in debates. So that
even when you're running for a party that's established.
Exactly.
Like Liberty Union.
Well, yeah, and that also happened when there's a co-opting going on of our democracy by the leaderships in the party and the debate hosts.
The powers that be.
Yeah, and the Vermont Digger next week is having one in Rutland, where they certainly have not invited me to participate, and people want the participation.
Yeah, be careful of your idea of who the good guy is out there, because there is a massive attempt from the power structure down to keep third-party candidates away from the process, and it's getting worse.
Right, and people, the average person does not know how much work alternative leaders like me have done behind the scenes, with lawsuits, with requests for new rules, and a lot of time, and it doesn't really appear very gubernatorial to be arrested and hauled off the stage, so I'm not going for that or to do something super flaky. But to your point about the political therapy group, it has been brutal in the past running. The shaming that the press has attempted to do, which I'm not feeling so shamed anymore, but we're having fun with it. I mean, it's important to have fun while doing this, so we have good memories.
Right.
So John and I are going around the state, and if you see a little mini school bus, if it runs for us and doesn't break down, but it seems to be choosing where to stop and break down, then start up and go fine. It's a little rainbow-colored school bus, and inside are 2 seats, 2 benches that we can sit in, and we have a little sandwich board that we put out, kind of like Lucy in the Peanuts, in the Peanuts strip that says, the candidate is in, and it says, come on board for a political therapy group. So we're having fun within this serious work.
Right. So the thing about political therapy is that whenever you go into therapy, the issue is, can we get to the root cause? Can we get to the underlying cause of whatever the problem is? And it's usually something that happened in your childhood when you're in therapy. So what is the underlying problem in our politics? Why do things keep getting worse and worse, and we get to choose between Tweedledee and Tweedledum when there's no real difference? Why is that? Where is the actual problem? So that's what political therapy would be, and that's what I believe Emily would be able to do as governor.
Well-
Really begin to address the issue of what is really underlyingly wrong in the way that politics is conducted.
Well, may I sort of amend that idea?
Okay.
You got
'Cause,
2 minutes.
Okay, so we know, people know in their guts what's wrong. They know something's wrong. And yes, you know, being able to see the systems that are wrong as a matter of comparison, but also sometimes you can heal without analyzing what is wrong by having an attention in your heart of what we call knowing what is in our hearts is possible. And that's part of the reaching out to the people in the different communities to expand their thinking on what is possible, to give them the go-ahead and the encouragement, like Bethel, the town of Bethel, to move forward. And that's really what my intention is as a leader to do, and to encourage a balance of feminine concepts that are now missing in our foundation.
Well, we have to wind this up, and I do want to remind people that my 2 previous interviews with Ian Baldwin will be posted on YouTube probably in a couple of hours. And they're also posted on the ORCA site. So geoengineering, with the history of geoengineering and the present state of geoengineering, is 2 half-hour programs going up on this
Good.
on this channel and on my channel, House at Pooh Corner with Jim Hogue. And
So
you know,
may I practice?
check that out.
You have excellent interviews, and people should know that you're one of the leading interviewers of whistleblowers. And it's so important that we support those people who will tell us what is going wrong in government.
And I try not to bother with people who are in the paradigm because they're already out there.
So,
Yeah,
my appeal to you viewers is, come over to our paradigm, and I thank you for your support and your vote.
And thanks for listening. Bye-bye.